Welcome back to the channel. This is TwoTenEast, and this review is brought to you by a request. Sadly, I cannot give the person a direct shout out because despite thorough searching, I could not find the comment I remember seeing a while back asking me to watch and review this show. So if you're out there, this one's for you. If you're watching this video because you haven't seen this show and are thinking of watching, not to worry, I'll be doing a spoiler-free review first, and after that, I'll take a dive into some deeper analysis for the rest of the video. So no need to feel put off by how long this video is. I'll let you know when we get into the spoiler section, at which point you can stop watching and go watch the show, or not. And with that being said, let's get started. Love and Fortune is a Japanese Netflix series which really felt more like an epic film broken up into 12 different parts. The series is based on a josei manga of the same name. Every one of the 12 episodes is under 30 minutes, so it's very bingeable and won't require a huge commitment time-wise. However, your emotional commitment is another story. The plot centers around the relationship between a woman in her 30s named Wako Teira, sorry about the pronunciations, and a 15-year-old boy named Yumeki Iko. And yup, you heard that right. This is a show about the romance between a woman in her 30s and a 15-year-old boy. If this is going to be a deal breaker for you, if it's a premise that makes you uncomfortable or offends you, then let me just say, I am not here to justify or defend it, only to review and analyze the show as a work of art. I say this because during this review, I'm going to praise this show in many ways because I honestly think it's a beautifully crafted piece of filmmaking and storytelling. And I just wanted to be clear that my praise of the show's artistic substance is not the same as praise or approval of its romantic dynamic in a vacuum. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can get to talking about the show. Despite what it may seem like at a glance, Love and Fortune is much more than a story of taboo love told for the sake of being risque. Through its storytelling and cinematography, it explores and makes commentary on several different topics such as gender roles, how we experience time, the life-sucking expectations society places on how we live our lives, and the ever-fluctuating mysteries of human emotion. And of course, the art of cinema itself and its ontological significance. You know, stuff like that. With cinema being one of the main themes that runs throughout the show and interconnects with many of the other themes I just mentioned, it'd be pretty awkward if Love and Fortune was lacking in its visual presentation. Fortunately, the cinematography is absolutely beautiful. Besides its overall aesthetic appeal, it's also really interesting and dynamic, and yet never too distracting. The choices of various editing styles appropriately matches the interior world of its characters and their emotions. The soundtrack is also great, with a really nice variety of electronic ambient music, some traditional instrumental stuff, and all of it is used really effectively to set the mood of whatever scene is taking place, without ever being overly dramatic or cheesy. Whether it's the sound design or the cinematography, every aspect of Love and Fortune's production serves to heighten and convey its characters' emotions and psychological states. These can be either subtle enhancers, like an ambient piece of music pulsing in the background to allow us to hear and feel Iko's anxiety, or editing techniques that turns Wako's search for a job into a surrealist video game run. Oh, and by the way, the acting is also really good. This show has so many layers to it, and even if you're not into all the deeper artsy stuff, the emotional weight of its story alone will give you all you can handle, I promise. The two main characters will frustrate you, invite you to judge them and condemn them, but also make you feel sorry for them and understand them as they become more developed. Their romance is heartfelt and poetic, but also pretty unhealthy and toxic at the same time. The story, the production, it all comes together and gives you a very trance-like feeling while you're watching. And it can make the relatively short episodes feel a lot longer than they really are. Alright, so before I wrap up this spoiler-free review, let's just quickly go over some other aspects of the show you need to be aware of before you watch. First, not only is this show about a very taboo kind of romance, it's also completely unapologetic about shoving it in your face. If you're someone who thinks this premise is just morally wrong and gross, and you think that would keep you from enjoying the show, maybe just skip it. But if you're a big fan of cinema in general, I'd still try and give it a shot anyways. 2 episodes should be enough to know if you'll be able to stomach it. But yeah, Be warned, this show is TVMA rated. There are many explicit sex scenes that will really push your limits if you're going into it already being uncomfortable with the adult teenager romance thing. Second, this show is beautiful and deep and layered, but it's also very sad and depressing, and can be frustrating as well. If you're looking for a sweet and innocent, upbeat romance show, you've come to the wrong place. But if, however, you're okay with getting all sad and depressed and melancholy, then you're good to go. This is not to say that the show doesn't also have its upbeat and funny moments as well, but if that's the main kind of tone you're interested in, you're gonna be disappointed. Third, characters. This show's entire thematic structure is formed around the two main characters, Wako and Iko. And because of this, their development will involve them seeming pretty unlikable and frustrating at times. Besides their romance itself being morally questionable, the connections made to other external forces and themes constantly aims to complicate and bring into question who they are as people, and what causes them to feel and act the way they do, making it hard to pin them down as simply right or wrong, good or bad. If you're someone who needs your protagonist to be likable at all times, to always make the morally correct decisions, then you might have some difficulty enjoying the story. Alright, that's gonna do it for this spoiler-free portion of the review. I hope you found this informative and it's helped you decide whether you want to check this show out. And if this is where you stop watching, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It really helps me out a lot as a small YouTube channel. And without further ado, let's get into some deeper analysis. Alright, so I figured the best place to start is the baseline for everything else, and that is that no matter how many themes you layer on and surround it with, no matter how beautiful you make the cinematography, this is still ultimately a story about a high school student and a 30-year-old adult being in love and having sex. And although my extensive one-search Google research tells me the legal age of consent in Japan is actually 13, this is still considered to be pretty taboo and scandalous there, as is conveyed in the show through many different characters. During the show, it actually seems to say that this is still illegal to have intercourse or sex acts with anyone under 18, so I'm actually not really sure what to believe. Maybe someone more knowledgeable on the subject can clear that up for me in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. So whether it's characters with larger roles like Sakaki and Tsuchiya, or ancillary characters like the other kids at Iko's school or the co-workers of Wako, everyone seems to have something to say about the taboo nature of this romance. These voices are meant to represent the voice of society as well as the thoughts of the audience watching this show as it unfolds. Meanwhile, Wako and Iko are in their own little world, trying desperately to just be happy together, to protect themselves from the world at large and its judgment. One of the many examples of symbolism in this show is the little toys that Wako gets in the vending machine. These toys all come in their own little plastic bubbles, and this calls to mind a very visual representation of the nature of Wako and Iko's romance. This connection is pretty much spelled out in these scenes during the credits where Wako and Iko are shown floating in the ocean in their own bubbles, and this is also shown at another point later on. The idea of being in a bubble comes up plenty of other times through different types of framing, like here when Miss Mizuno looks at Wako through this rolled up magazine, or all of the shots of Wako doing laundry, which also ties in with another theme of being dirty or clean. Anyways, back to the toys. The toys and the vending machine symbolize different people we encounter or chance upon in life, and the luck involved, the chance we take whenever we choose to get to know somebody new. Wako constantly refers to the idea of rare ones, whether it be literally the toy she wants to get in the vending machine or the type of person that she happens to become romantically involved with. The lion is shown as one of the rare toys, which comes to represent Iko, as he is introduced into the story shortly after Wako glances longingly at it in the vending machine. If we think forward to the ending, it is the lion that is given back to Wako by her old boss, and although we never see Iko himself in the end scene, we do see the lion that symbolizes the rare one that he is to Wako. So another motif within this theme of taboo love is the idea of being dirty or clean. Throughout the show, but especially in the first half, there are many moments and shots of Wako on the ground or on the floor. This represents two different things about her character. On the one hand, as it is referenced by many characters and shown through Wako's own actions, she is a fairly submissive person. at least at the beginning of the show. She's fairly timid and submits to her boyfriend Fu, and ultimately has also submitted to society's expectation of how she should live her life. Find a career, work every day, save money, get married, have kids. We'll get to society later on, but this idea of submission to other people around her is definitely connected and paralleled by this submission to society and its plan for her life. Getting back to the taboo aspect, it also represents a kind of closeness to being dirty or near dirt, which can obviously be a metaphor for her dirty, unclean, immoral choice in love. In episode 2, when she gives Iko, oral pleasure in the karaoke bar, he remarks how dirty the floor is, and this is a reference to this motif of being dirty, of their love being immoral and taboo. Wako goes home and takes a shower with her boyfriend Fu, as if to get clean again after performing such a dirty act with a younger person. Her boyfriend represents everything normal, everything society expects of her, and the fact that she takes this shower with him and has sex with him in the shower is a clear symbolic kind of cleansing. So anyways, pay attention to all of the times Wako showers in the show, and how it conveys this idea of cleansing dirty actions or thoughts. So let's keep going with this whole taboo thing and how the show makes you think about how wrong or right or clean or dirty Iko and Wako's love is. One of the first things that came to my mind when I started watching the show, and perhaps many of you thought it as well, is, okay, this is pretty weird and kind of wrong, but I think I can handle this. I mean, they're in love, right? I'm not saying I was totally cool with it from the jump, but I gotta admit to myself, I was kind of just like, okay. It's not going to stop me from watching or anything. And then I caught myself and thought, but what if the genders were swapped? And what if this were a man in his 30s and a 15-year-old girl in high school? Obviously, and I'm sure most of you would agree, I would be totally disgusted and probably wouldn't even watch this show. This really made me question myself and my own bias. Like, why do I have a different degree of outrage when the genders are swapped? Shouldn't it be the same? In either case, it's an adult taking advantage of pretty much a child. If you didn't start contemplating this gender swap in your head on your own, the show eventually introduces its own helping hand in the form of the plot thread of the famous director Kagemitsu Okihara, who Iko and Wako both admire. He is shown to have a very public relationship with a young girl. This provides a contrast and compare moment, not just because the genders are swapped, but also because of the contrast of the director's relationship being very public and all over the news. He seems to be very open and unafraid to tell people about it, whereas Wako spends a lot of the show trying to hide Iko and their romance from other people and society at large. So how else is gender important in this romance? And what does the show want to say about gender and our expectations and associations with the male and female dynamic? Let's explore that next. The theme of gender is established and introduced from the very first episode, during a conversation Wako has with her coworker, Miss Mizuno, who pretty much acts as the voice of empowerment for Wako in the early episodes of the series. She points out that Wako does most of the work in her relationship with Fu, like cleaning the apartment and paying more than half of the expenses. She then makes a remark on gender equality and how men shouldn't talk about equality until they've experienced menstrual cramps. So obviously this is all in good fun, but it shows how foundational this theme of gender roles is going to be, as it is already being mentioned within the first 5 minutes. Comparing Wako's relationship with Fu and her relationship with Iko is a good segue into further exploration of these gender roles and expectations. With Fu, her role as a girlfriend and potential wife comes with many duties and expectations, such as doing all the housework, pleasing her man, and eventually bearing children. Wako is submissive, and although she bears most of the responsibility of being an adult, the power dynamic is not in her favor at all. On the one hand, Fu tells her to get a full-time job, suggesting the idea of gender equality in a relationship, and also that Wako needs to be more mature and think about a career. But at the same time, he can't really get it together to propose to her properly so they can get married. He sits around and plays video games, and seems like he's just not taking their relationship seriously. which seems pretty immature for someone treating their partner like they're immature. Then we look at Wako's relationship with Iko and how the fact that he is so young changes this conventional dynamic between man and woman in a relationship. While Wako is almost treated like a child by Fu, even though they are both adults and pretty much the same age, Iko is literally a child. And so the dynamic of their romance gives Wako a chance to finally feel like she is more in control and has more power. This is evident in her initial courtship of Iko as well as sexually, at least at first. Wako mentions in a flashback that Fu chose her, and their relationship began through his initiative. But with Iko, Wako is able to choose someone for herself. She is in control. When Wako and Iko first engage in sexual activity in the karaoke bar, Wako is in complete control. She has all the power during that entire event, and she is in charge. While it is true that Iko is just a kid and Wako is the adult, thus shifting this power dynamic, Iko is still a man, albeit a young one, and Wako is still a woman. And this is where things get complicated and even convoluted. This shot here in episode 1 where Iko is saying that although Okihara's films are great, they are also convoluted. And this is definitely a foreshadowing of their own romantic saga. The convolution comes from this dichotomy of the power dynamic between an adult and a child, and a man and a woman. This is shown as the story and Wako and Iko's relationship progresses. Wako is able to feel like a woman when she is with Iko, and Iko is able to explore and pretty much awaken his sexuality with Wako as his guide. On the other hand, they are unable to avoid these gender roles that have been ingrained in them by society, and Iko feels this pressure to act like a man and take charge, which is a real struggle for him because he's so young and inexperienced. Okay, so we know that a big variable in this relationship dynamic is their age, how it shifts and disrupts gender roles. But let's look at the framework of age itself, which is time, and how time appears and is used in Love and Fortune. Since we were just talking about gender, let's start with a great quote from Fu's friend Risa, who during a dinner where she tells him to basically get his shit together and marry Wako already, explains that men and women experience time differently, which I thought was such a cool way of thinking about this. And it really is true in the context of the normal trajectory of love and a life of marriage and kids and all that shit which we're trained to pursue from an early age, especially girls. Basically what Risa is saying here is that while both men and women can choose to get married at whatever age they like, men can take their time with having kids as they are still able to do their part in making a baby even into old age. Women, on the other hand, are subject to a much more limited biological clock, a specific window in which they are able to have children. For this reason, women cannot just take their time with having kids and are subject to a lot more internalized pressure and expectation to get married. There is also the very unfortunate standard society puts upon women to be desirable to men and to look young and beautiful. In many cultures, older women are no longer desirable after a certain age, and it's all just really messed up, but Risa is spitting facts here. So, from the very first episode and throughout the show, we see Wako constantly being reminded of this pressure and expectation, whether it's from her sister in the first episode, other characters remarking on her age and how she's getting old, why isn't she married, oh, you don't have a boyfriend or a husband, oh, you must be just trying to get this temp job to fool us into getting maternity leave, and so on. It's interesting to apply this idea of men and women experiencing time differently to the age gap between Iko and Wako. Just like Risa explains for men and women, I think it's also pretty safe to say that the young and the old also experience time differently. And here we see how the age and gender of these two characters are both interconnected within their relation to the theme of time. Does this justify a teenager and an adult falling in love hypothetically in real life? Ethically speaking? I'm not saying it does, but it does explain why it makes sense thematically in this fictional TV show. It's proof that the show, or I guess the manga really, didn't choose this dynamic just to be risque, but because it serves to carry out this commentary on our concept of age and gender and how they affect our sense of time. So I'm pretty sure all of you watching can relate to the concept of experiencing time differently when you were young compared to how you do now. When you're young, everything is in the moment, everything seems to move slowly. Next summer vacation generation seems like it's the far distant future, forever away, and when you're older you start to feel time passing by much faster. You think ahead a lot more, and yeah, you get the idea. So the show does a really good job of showing this concept through different moments the characters experience. When Wako and Iko begin discussing their relationship, Wako thinks about the future and wonders if he still will love her when she is old. Iko answers with the immediate certainty of youth, "Don't worry, I'll love you forever." But you can see Wako's expression when he says this. She knows from experience how things you begin feeling certain about can change over time, and he's just too young to really foresee that, too inexperienced. Iko is also constantly reminded that he knows nothing about the adult world Wako lives in. When they begin trying to plan out how to be together, he finds himself frustrated by his limitations as a kid, not yet an adult. The irony here is that for Wako, she has her own limitations as an adult who can no longer experience time the same way as Iko, and has much more difficulty finding the passion and optimism youth is so potent with. One scene that I think really illustrates this well is during episode 8 when Wako visits Iko's school. This brings me to a really cool aspect within the idea of time. When Wako goes there, she is filled with nostalgia of her past, while of course for Iko, he is very much in the present, living in the moment, enjoying high school for the very first time. It really seems to hit home for Wako in the scene that even though they are here together in the same space, they are experiencing time differently in their own separate worlds. This is where the character of Sakaki comes into play. From the moment she is first introduced, I thought to myself, wow, she could easily be a young Wako. And I think a reading of Sakaki's character as not a literal but symbolic younger Wako, existing in a different time and yet at the same time, isn't too far-fetched, so just hear me out. Both Sakaki and Wako fall for Iko. Both are artistically inclined, and both support his dream of being a filmmaker. In this scene, there is definitely a recognition and acknowledgement between Sakaki and Wako, because yes, I believe they represent different versions or possibilities of Iko's romantic life in different times. Another cool detail here is the bubbles the kids are all blowing, which surround Wako as she is pondering all of this. Again, representing the bubbles everyone lives within, the bubbles her and Iko are in on the waves, the bubbles the toys come in at the vending machine, and yeah, just thought it was a nice detail. Another clue and supportive evidence to my little interpretation here is that Sakaki plays the lead role in Iko's film, which is based on a dream Wako had when she was young. So here, Sakaki is literally playing the role of a young Wako running from her fears. Alright, so let's look at some other ways time is portrayed. For one, there's the format of the show itself. There are 12 episodes, each 24 minutes long. 12 numbers on a clock, 24 hours in a day. Alright, whatever, I thought it was pretty cool when I noticed it. If we go back to gender roles for a minute, the duty of women to carry out the birth of the next generation can also be seen as the cycle of time, of birth and continuation of the human race. It is how humanity itself measures time, in the generation before and generation after. Also, if we think about the theme of being dirty and clean, we can see another kind of symbolic cycle in the motif of the washing of Wako's clothes in the washing machine. There are several scenes where Wako goes to sit in front of the washer to talk on the phone in secret at night to Iko, and this visual pairing is no coincidence. Remember also in the first episode we see Wako framed within the circle of the washing machine from inside it, as if foreshadowing all of the cycles in the show that will be appearing, as well as the notion of Wako being dirty or clean. Hey, I'm just saying guys, it's there. Then of course there is also the cycle of society, the routine path of life we are all expected to participate in and help continue. This is where we get to our final theme, which I'm just gonna call... So throughout the entire show, running parallel to the narrative of Iko and Wako's romance is the narrative of the movie The Emotionless Ocean, made by Kagemitsu Okihara, the famous director that both protagonists admire. References and clips of it appear both diegetically as the show progresses, but is also fed to us, the audience, bit by bit at the end of each episode. As you get deeper and deeper into the show, the full picture of what this film is all about comes into focus, leading up to the last episode where it's pretty much spelled out. So I'm not going to go over the whole plot of the movie since I'm assuming if you're watching this now, you've seen the show already. So instead, let's just take a look at how it interconnects with Iko and Wako's romance. So first, this separate narrative of Okihara's films serves as a reference to the play within a play concept that Shakespeare is famous for. This film is analyzed and watched by Iko and Wako, just as we, the audience, analyze and watch Love and Fortune, the show that Wako and Iko exist within. In many ways, this film is symbolic of their own story arc. Again, I'm just gonna briefly go over this, but if you remember in episode 2, Iko and Wako go to see Okihara speak, and he describes how he always has oceans in his movies because the tides of oceans represent the pull and push nature of human emotion and their movement. This is literally describing how love can work and how Iko and Wako's romance evolves. We can see the shift from Wako pulling Iko close to her starting from episode 1 to Iko later pulling Wako when she starts to have doubts later on in the show. It can be described as the changes in their power dynamics, but it all stems from the emotional movement within them and their romance. So after they go and see Okihara speak, Iko tells Wako he wants to go tour all of the locations in the movie, and they agree that they want to do that sometime in the future. Then the rest of the show happens, and their story unfolds, all the pull towards each other, the push in the form of judgment from a society that expects them to submit to a mundane, repetitive existence without passion. Both Iko and Wako share this love of movies, and movies themselves are a kind of escape from one's own world into another. It takes you away from your everyday life and allows you to feel all kinds of emotions and have experiences that you might not have in real life. So let's think about Wako and her life again. She is trapped in what she feels is a meaningless existence. She is wondering whether to completely submit to society's routine and plan for her, or whether she still has a chance to find her passion again. Of course, this is the same as Okihara's movie, where the virus kills all emotion. In the real world, it is society and a career that does not involve your passion for life, or a marriage in which you don't feel passionate about love, that can kill your emotions. The one place she can still find an escape, a way back to feeling passion and pure emotions again, is the cinema. It is then no accident that she meets Iko at the cinema, and that they share this passion. Iko becomes this living manifestation of cinema to Wako. His youth and all of the passion and optimism and possibility that comes with it is something she so desperately desires for herself. It is a way for her to revisit the state of being passionate and alive, much like when she goes to see a movie. Let's go back to episode 1, where we can really see how masterfully this show subtly foreshadows all of this visually to the audience. First, we have the scene where Wako goes to get some new shoes. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's Risa who is there with her, and she says that Wako should get heels because they are the shoes you're supposed to get for work to pursue a career in. She also remarks how Wako doesn't really know what she wants to do for a living yet. But after this scene, there is a very intentional cut from Wako slipping on the heels to her in her New Balance shoes, which are red and blue. Okay, they're kind of orangish red, but work with me here. Then we see when she meets Iko for the first time. Oh, by the way, she is watering plants when she first sees him. Remember how the people infected by the virus in the movie and have no emotions are called plants? Okay, so yeah, when they first really meet, it turns out that they both have the same shoes with the same colors. Also, Wako is wearing blue while Iko is wearing red. Inside the theater itself, the seats are also red and blue. Aside from just trying to flex on you guys here, I really want to show how this series is so detailed and well made, even down to its use of color to set up its thematic foundation. These sneakers and these colors represent youth and passion and emotions. At first, Wako is always wearing these shoes, and it shows her internal struggle of not yet knowing what she wants to do with her life, what path to take. She's not yet ready for the heels of a career and a cyclical life without meaning. It also just shows the connection that these two will develop. This is then brought full circle at the end, where Wako begins her own kind of theater house thing, where she hosts her own screenings and has guest directors, one of them being Iko. Also, in one of these last scenes, notice the flowers that are there just like when they first meet. On a side note, if anyone watching this knows Japanese, can you read what the note on the flowers says? Is it anything interesting or maybe relevant? I'd love to know, so thanks in advance. So if we follow this idea of Iko representing cinema, then a lot of the other parts of the show connect thematically. Let's go back to the idea of control and the dynamic of Iko and Wako's relationship. Wako thought that having a younger boyfriend gave her more control and passion, but ultimately we see their relationship being too complicated and hard to maintain. And now, in the end, Wako has found that she can find the same control and passion within the symbolic equivalent of Iko, her first love, which is cinema. Her control is being the boss of her new place, and the passion, of course, is her passion for film. Instead of trying to nurture and bring along Iko as a lover and an adult, she chooses instead to nurture creativity and art in general, in the form of giving young directors a space to show their own movies. If we remember during the show, Wako does try to encourage and nurture Iko's creativity and his own passion, but their romance and the struggle of managing that always seems to get in the way. Now she has found a way to still get everything beneficial she got out of her romance with Iko and filter out all of the unhealthy toxicity. Her new job or career is one that is basically all about helping others cultivate and further their passions, and creating works of cinema that might go on to help others enjoy their own escapes, their own brief breaks from their everyday lives. And that's just so satisfying to see for her character. So if you needed any further evidence about my claim of Iko representing cinema itself, let's look at that camera he gets during the show. It essentially comes to represent his inner self and his thoughts, and we see examples of his internal thoughts or feelings being exposed to others who see the footage on his camera. Mishima sees the footage of Wako and him having sex, Iko's secret that no one knows about, intimate moments, memories recorded digitally. It's what his friends didn't know occupied his mind and his time. The same happens for Wako when she sees the footage of Sakaki playing the piano. She can plainly see from it that Iko thinks about and cares for Sakaki, and sees the potential romance there, even if Iko himself doesn't seem to be aware of it. Again, it's this look into his psyche and his feelings that connects cinema to Iko himself. So yeah, all that happens, but what about the tour of the locations in Okihara's movie? Well, this is why I think it's also really cool how the plan Iko and Wako make in episode 2 finally happens in the end at episode 12. And it really shows what I was just talking about really well. After all the suffering and hardship they had to go through during their romantic arc, it was so nice to see these two just connecting and bonding in the best possible way, free of judgment, and both enjoying their passion for film. They act out all of the scenes from Okihara's movie, and it almost seems like this blending of reality and film, as if they are sinking, just like the moon, into the ocean, into being the same as the characters in the movie. At the same time, there are also hints that they are not quite the same, that they are separate from the movie and those characters, like when they reenact the scene where the couple in the movie almost kiss, but the girl pulls away. Except that Iko and Wako actually kiss. Then all of the stuff at the dock happens. And this is one of the deepest scenes, pun intended, of the show. It really brings home everything leading up to it in the episode, and the show as a whole. While Iko and Wako have their conversation about what their plan for their relationship is, Wako starts to walk towards the camera, on the Z-axis from the space of depth, as if rejecting the idea of sinking into the background of the frame, coming forwards away from the ocean, the emotionless ocean. She is saying that she doesn't want to work a boring job, and tells Iko their plan to live together in an apartment, work only to make a living, live that mundane life of routine without passion is not for her. She leads as Iko follows, and her decision here is what allows them to escape that potential future. She knows from experience that Iko and her living like that could very well end up being just the same as her and Fu. And so she leads Iko out of the deepness, and in doing so, she saves him from that life without passion. She has made up her mind to find her own way of living and finding passion, even within the emotionless ocean. And this is shown visually with this final shot of Iko leaving the dock, the ocean, the moon behind, and going to experience the rest of his youth as he should, leaving Wako until they can meet again at a different time. So, are they still romantically involved at the end? We can't say for sure. Maybe Wako is just waiting for Iko to grow up, like she said, and their experience of time to be aligned. So maybe now they would have a shot, maybe not. But given all of this I just went over, it's still a pretty hopeful ending, just like Okihara says. If you're with me on Iko being one and the same with cinema, then the choice to not have him physically there in the end has even more symbolic meaning. Although Wako is not shown with Iko himself at the end, she is shown to be back together with her other love, her other source of passion, cinema. And if Iko and cinema are the same, then how poetic is the choice to see him for the last time, not physically there himself, but only existing within that footage on his camera, and within a part of cinema itself. Alright, that's gonna do it for my review of Love and Fortune. If you actually watched this whole video, You're amazing, and I love you, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you appreciate these kind of deep, long-winded analysis videos, let me know by hitting that subscribe button for more videos. Also, be sure to like it so this video can get seen more. And of course, drop a comment too, and let me know what you thought about the show. I love hearing all your takes and observations as well. This is 210 East, and I'll see you next time.